Let me tell you why I believe that the the Great Flood in Genesis was a probably a real flood. It just didn't envelop the entire world. To the people writing the book of Genesis, their world was probably pretty much all of the Middle East. And I don't think that the Great Flood flooded the entire Middle East. It is a proven fact that during that time, flooding was a real problem in the Tigris and Yangtze rivers, which is where Noah was. That's where he lived. So, yeah, taking everything at face value never gets you far. You always have to have an open mind as a scientist or as anything, but you can't believe everything until you have evidence for it. Now, you may be asking, well, what's your evidence for God? And truthfully, my evidence is humans didn't happen, life didn't happen on accident. I do believe that the Earth is 4.4 billion years old, and life happened around 1 or 2 billion years as just as clump of cells. And I believe that God made that happen. It's a very unlikely coincidence that everything could line up in the perfect way to just spawn life out of nowhere. That is like a 1 in billion chance. Probably not that big, but I'm not going into the real math of it. What I'm saying, I am a Christian, but I am grounded in science. I am what's known as a scientific Christian. I don't know if that's actually the correct term, but it's one of the terms that is used. If it isn't in the Bible, then turn to science. Now, if this is annoying you, sorry. It's ADHD thing. Anyway, I'm just going to do it over here then. Anyway, I am a Christian, like I said. A lot of the stories of the Bible are stories. Personally, I do think King David was a real person, because he is mentioned, kinda, in other sources that aren't just the Bible. But he's mentioned as a house, not really a person. Which basically just means a royal dynasty descended from someone named David. Which sounds like David. David. Sounds like David. It could be him. We just don't know until we find another source that has his name in it directly talking about him. If I want to believe something from the Bible, I have to see it in other texts around the same area. If they aren't there, then there's a possibility that they could be true, but maybe not. Especially in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is what I would do that in. The New Testament being much newer than the Old Testament, a few hundred years newer, and a lot of the events have Roman documentation of. Romans have documented things around Jesus. We found, maybe, I actually don't know. This part is speculation. Speculation. Well, not speculation, but wait, what's the proper term for it? Well, it's something I think we did, but I don't remember, and I'm not going to go into the research right now. Anyway, I think we found the tomb of Jesus. I don't know. That could have been just a hoax. But if it is, sorry, correct me on that if we haven't. Anyway, also, little side tangent. All of you people who keep saying Jesus was white, no, he was fully human and fully God, but again, fully human. Both of his parents were Hebrew. He would have looked more Arab or so, which, well, that's a little. He would have had more of a brown skin. He would have had probably shoulder length hair around this length that was very curly, which is what most people were back then. That's just what they would have looked like. And in the Bible, it also says long hair is a shame, but that isn't a law. That is definitely not a law. That things being said in the Bible doesn't always mean it's true. It could just be a part of the dialogue or so. Just because the Bible mentions slavery doesn't mean Christians advocate for slavery. It depicts slavery. Yeah, duh. Slaves were everywhere back then. But it does not mean Christians advocate or the Bible advocates for slavery. Again, slavery back then was just a little different, not fully. It's still slavery, still a bad thing. Owning someone under any circumstance shouldn't be tolerated unless they are trying to get out of debt in a way, which brings me to my next point. Slavery was a way to get out of debt for some. Some were forced into it, which is a terrible tragedy. Others was a little bit worse than an indentured servant, which is a lot of the Israelite slaves, the slaves belonging to the Israelites, were. A lot of them were indentured servants. Some of them weren't, which is again still bad. But those aren't laws made by the Bible. Those are laws made by people who just so happen to be some of the same people that were mentioned in the Bible. Not the Bible. This is just kind of a rant video right now, but it doesn't really have a script, so it's just a lot of people bring everything out of proportions on what they really were. This stuff is history, and it's archaeological evidence based. I'm again a scientific Christian. I will follow something if I believe it, but for me to believe it, I have to find it believable. The Great Flood most likely didn't happen around the entire Earth. And, oh, well, how come all of these civilizations have all these flood myths? They lived around rivers that flooded. No dip. That's easy. And people who advocate for the 6,000-year Earth thing, again, I already disproved that. But I'm not important enough, for one, to really change people's minds on that, for one, or two, I mean. And they say, oh, Pangea was a real thing, it just happened 6,000 years ago. And during the flood, the ground, or I can't remember what verse this was, but the ground split apart under the water. No, again, that wasn't the ground splitting apart. That is just a natural thing that happens during flooding. The earth can move, so the people writing or coming up with the story, most of Genesis wasn't written during Genesis, so again, people coming up with the folk story of Genesis were coming up with it probably during the time when Genesis was taking place, just a few thousand years ago. Maybe 6,000 years ago? Well, human civilization started happening roughly 7 to 8,000 years ago. That's when farming really became a thing around the Middle East and other places. And yeah, flooding happened everywhere, but it didn't happen everywhere all at once. We would have evidence for that. We don't. And people who talk about the behemoth in the Bible, saying that, oh, that's definitely a brontosaurus. People could have found the fossils of the brontosaurus and called it the behemoth because of its bigness. Or it very well could just be a giraffe or something. We don't fully know that. We definitely know that it wasn't a brontosaurus or a brachiosaurus or any clade of the sauropods. We know that because those went extinct millions of years ago. Sorry, I'm just looking for the verse in Genesis about it. Be right back. Sam, do your thing. Behold now. I found it. Behold now. Okay. It wasn't in Genesis, but I don't remember exactly where it takes place, though. In the Bible's chronological order. I don't remember. So just bear with me. Behold now, behemoth, which I made as well as you. Verse 15. Yeah, God, I'm just gonna go verse by verse. God created all the creatures through evolution. Duh. That's just, science has proven evolution exists. Human evolution, it says that the Bible created man through dust and clay. Specifically, it says Adam and Lilith, or Eve. I actually speculation here. I don't know if actually Lilith was a thing, truthfully. So I'm just gonna say that it maybe not, but for right now, for these purposes, I'm just gonna say it was just Eve. Also, Eve was not supposed to be submissive to Adam. Men weren't supposed to rule over women. That's a misconception. They're equal, they just have different roles in livelihood. And that's not saying any sexism. For anyone who gets offended that men and women usually have different roles in things that are usually good at, men are because they naturally have upper body strength that is stronger most of the time. Most of the time. They're usually working harder, hard labor. Women having softer parts, usually, most of the time. Not always. There's still different cases. That's just how humans work. They have different jobs, basically. That's not saying one of them is better than the other. The Bible never said that. Anyway, verse 15, Job 40, verse 15. Now, 16. Behold now, his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. Brontosaurus, or any clade of any dinosaur could be that. But again, could be a giraffe or an elephant. Giraffes have very long necks. They have a tail that whips for flies. They have very strong bellies, so he bends his tail like a cinder. The sinews of his thigh are knit together like a giraffe. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. That could be insinuating that they are strong, because it also could be that they noticed the color of fossils, how they are more of a darker brown, like iron ore, or bronze when it has been left out for a few hundred years. The bones of the behemoth could have been just that, fossils, not bone, technically not bone, because there's no bone left in them. There could have just been observations about a giraffe or the bones of the clade sauropod. He is the first of the way of God. Let his marker being near his sword. Now, it could be talking about a brontosaurus, but a lot of people who assume him talking about the behemoth as a brontosaurus, it could be a brontosaurus. They just assume that it's living along with them, but no. Why would you assume that the behemoth is still alive when God is talking about him here? So, yeah. He is the first in the way of God could mean that it was one of God's early creations. Giraffes could also be that, because giraffes have been around a little longer than humans have. So, yeah, and animals anyway became before humans anyway, even in Genesis. So, that could mean a bunch of different things. Surely the mountain brings him food, and all the beasts of the field play there. Under the lotus plant he lies down, oh no, not really, in the covert of the reeds and the marsh. Giraffe. The lotus plant covers him with shade. Giraffe. The willows of the brook surround him. I don't really know what that would mean. Just a plant surrounding him with willows. Yeah. If a river rages, he is not alarmed. He is confident through the Jordan rushes to his mouth. The Jordan River. Around the time this book was being written, giraffes roamed that area. Not really anymore. But yeah, back then they did. And I don't know if a giraffe would actually be able to stop a rushing river, but bones that have been there for millions of years could have. So that could also be a number of things. Can anyone capture him when he is on watch? With barbs, can anyone pierce his nose? Again, a giraffe. He's very tall. It's pretty hard to pierce a giraffe's nose. It also could be talking about fossils here, but again, could be. And then it talks about the Leviathan, which doesn't really have a comparison to any real-world animals, except for a whale, maybe. It could also just be entirely made up, or it could have been a real demon. That's something I don't know and I haven't researched. But I have researched a lot on the behemoth. And I found that it's either just talking about the fossils of the clade sauropod, or a giraffe, maybe even an elephant. So, or dauntless for all I care, I don't know. But that is what I believe with other parts of the Bible. And again, stories. They're really good stories. Not all of them are history. A good portion of them are, but not all of them. Again, if you take everything in face value, you're not going to get anywhere. Me coming to these realizations brought me closer to God, not farther. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's faith. And technically, it doesn't really matter what you believe, as long as you believe that God exists, Jesus is God, you are saved and forgiven by Him, and you walk the way of His teachings. What I mean by teachings is act like Jesus, basically. Don't be Jesus. Act like Him. Act like what a real Christian acts like. Not this bastardized version we have today. Fake Christians. Now, whoop, my third one. Talking about the Bible, I love doing. Now, talking about this book, I don't really like. At least the Bible has archaeological evidence of a lot of the civilizations in it that actually existed. This book right here, which a few Mormons came up, Mormon missionaries, they both wanted me to read this really bad, and they were trying to convert me to Mormonism. No. Reason, I already had a preconceived notion about this book, but now that I've read it, that notion has only gotten stronger. And on it, it says, another testament of Jesus Christ. Even though this book contradicts history, real history, and the Bible. I was meaning to get one of these books for a while, but I've read all the way through it. Listened to the audios of it, I mean. And all the people that follow this are all sheep following a wolf instead of a shepherd. The man who wrote this says that he is unable to provide the rock that he found that contained this book on it that he translated. Now, in the Bible, it says false preachings will be a sin, so this is false preaching. And some of you may be saying, oh, false preaching, that's what you're doing with your Bible that you're writing. I'm not writing a Bible, I'm writing a book. It's a fake that I'm not presuming as real. And I don't believe it either. My nephew's mom tried to sue me because of it, because of false doctrine. and she was trying to say that I was pagan. And that I was trying to make a cult. No, I am an author of a book. That is all I am. The scriptures of Citron, or the Citrion, are just that. It's a story. It's a fiction book. A fantasy fiction novel. Written like it's a Bible. And a Bible is literally just a book that is a collection of books. It's a compilation of books. That's all a Bible is. That's why the Holy Bible says Holy Bible. Scriptures of Citran is a collection of books. And to the people in my world, it's holy. But not in real life. Heck nah. The Scriptures of Citran are just basically reimaginings of all the Bible stories, but in a fantasy setting. And that is all they are. Now, what I have on this is that what it says is Citrion, the Scriptures of Citran, translator Cote Prometheus, from the Prometheus Foundation. That's a nod to this translation of the Bible. It's Holy Bible, New American Standard Version, from the Lockman Foundation. It's just a play on that. Scriptures of Citran, 2026 translation. That's also when I'm planning on releasing it. I have the full first book of origins of it. It has 18 chapters. The Prometheus Foundation. That's not a real foundation. It even has Prometheus in it, which is a name I made up, which is similar to a spirit in Wertanian culture, Kramitl, which is kind of where I got the word from, but yada yada. It's basically a play on my last name, C-R-A-M, cram, like you're cramming something into something else. But it's with a K, and with a Etheus, like Prometheus, but spelt different. K-R-A-M-I-T-H-I-U-S, Prometheus. Not Prometheus, Prometheus. Prometheus. Anyway, it's written like it's a Bible. That's what it's supposed to be. But anyway, that's what this book is. It is a fiction book. I am not writing it to make a new religion. I am not trying to make a new sect of Christianity. I've never been doing that. I am just believing what I believe. Another part of my philosophy is do unto others as they would have them do unto you. That is one of the most Christian things there is. Do unto others as they would have them do unto you. Matthew 7:12. That was drilled into my brain. Another part of my philosophy, and what should be a part of all Christians' philosophy, is let them do what they do. Let them have the right to choose for themselves. But don't let them have the right to infringe on your rights. That's a simple concept to get, and I don't see why it's offensive. Except for little pansies who can't take truth. Well, yeah. Anyway, that's a wrap, a snap, a dap, and a lap lap app. Also, say hi, Sam. since you will be editing this, I am very sorry. I will help you with directions. Sorry. Why am I doing? It's her job, so. Sam, good luck editing this, and say hi, everyone, to my new editor. Say hi, Sam. So, see ya.